What if I told you the fiercest rivalry of modern Formula One has just flipped on its head? What if I told you Lewis Hamilton, after years of tension, has admitted to learning from Max Verstappen? What if I told you the 7-time champion called Verstappen's resilience and technique extraordinary? And what if I told you this confession has shaken Ferrari, stunned the paddock, and redefined the future of F1? Imagine Formula One's fiercest rivalry, Hamilton versus Verstappen, suddenly turning on its head. For years, their battle has defined the sport, from the brutal title war of 2021 to the echoes of controversy that followed them across every paddock. Fans saw animosity, tension, even open hostility. And yet, in 2025, the unthinkable has happened. Lewis Hamilton, the 7-time champion, has admitted not only respect, but admiration. He has confessed to learning from the very man who once denied him an 8th crown. It is a twist no one predicted, and it has detonated through Formula One like a bomb. Hamilton's words were not vague compliments, they were specific, deliberate, and shocking. After years of rivalry, he publicly praised Max Verstappen's resilience, technique, and adaptability. He admitted studying Verstappen's lines, learning from the way Max drives a car on the edge, extracting performance when machinery falters. That's something I've struggled with in the SF25, Hamilton confessed. In that one sentence, the myth of eternal animosity was shattered. The greatest driver of his era was willing to learn from his rival, and willing to say it out loud. To understand why this moment matters, you must remember the context. Hamilton's Ferrari move was supposed to be his redemption, the fairy tale finale. Instead, the SF25 betrayed him, unstable suspension, hydraulic failures, strategy errors. In Hungary, he broke down, calling himself absolutely useless. At the same time, Verstappen was staging one of the greatest comebacks the sport has seen, cutting a 104-point gap down to 69 in weeks. The contrast was brutal, Hamilton broken, Verstappen resurgent. Against that backdrop, Hamilton's words carried even greater weight. They were not spoken from strength, but from vulnerability. And that vulnerability made the respect all the more powerful. Formula One has never been kind to humility. Champions protect their legacies fiercely, often refusing to admit weakness. Yet Hamilton did what few greats ever dare. He opened the door. He admitted that his fiercest rival had qualities he himself was striving to learn. What impresses me about Max is how he finds grip where there is none, Hamilton said. It wasn't diplomacy. It was a confession of growth. And in a sport where egos rule, growth from a champion is explosive. The paddock reeled. Ferrari insiders whispered of shock, reading Hamilton's words as a veiled critique of Maranello's failures. Charles Leclerc, visibly uncomfortable, gave a careful answer about focusing on the team. But the tension was obvious. Hamilton's respect for Verstappen wasn't just personal, it highlighted Ferrari's incompetence. Verstappen thrives with a flawed car. Hamilton suffers with one. The contrast stung. Hamilton's confession was therefore both admiration for a rival and indictment of his own team. That duality is why it exploded beyond the usual media cycle. So here we are in 2025, witnessing history bend in a way no one saw coming. The war between Hamilton and Verstappen has not ended, it has evolved. From fire and fury to something richer, mutual recognition, mutual learning, and mutual respect. This is no longer just rivalry. It is legacy written in real time. And it leaves us with one burning question. If Hamilton can learn from Verstappen, and Verstappen admits to learning from Hamilton, what happens when they face each other again in 2026, with both carrying the best of the other? That is not just a fight. That is Formula One at its purest. When Hamilton signed with Ferrari, the world expected poetry. The 7-time world champion, dressed in scarlet, chasing one final crown. It was supposed to be redemption, a closing act worthy of the greatest driver of his generation. Instead, 2025 became a nightmare. The SF25, hyped as Ferrari's return to glory, turned into a flawed, unpredictable beast. Suspension geometry crippled cornering balance, hydraulics failed in the rain, and strategy calls bordered on negligence. The tipping point came in Hungary. After a disastrous Q2 exit, Hamilton stood silent against the pit wall, helmet off, shoulders slumped. He admitted he felt absolutely useless. It was the image of a man stripped of confidence by the very team that promised him a fairy tale ending. At the same time, Verstappen was scripting a different story. Just months earlier, his title hopes looked dead, over 100 points behind, his reign supposedly broken. But Red Bull solved their early season problems, and Verstappen unleashed a masterclass in consistency. At Monza, he dominated from pole. At Baku, he repeated the feat, ruthlessly efficient while McLaren imploded. In just a handful of weekends, he clawed back 35 points, shrinking the gap from 104 to 69. The paddock, once convinced the fight was over, began to whisper, "Max is back." The momentum had shifted. This contrast, Hamilton broken, Verstappen reborn, created the crucible for Hamilton's words. Vulnerability on one side, resurgence on the other. A driver drowning in Ferrari's chaos looked across the garage lane and saw a rival thriving in adversity. That irony could not have been sharper. Hamilton, the man who once defined resilience, now struggling to adapt. Verstappen, the man once accused of recklessness, now embodying composure. The symmetry was undeniable. And it was in this context, against this backdrop of collapsing dreams and rising predators, that Hamilton dropped the bombshell, an admission of respect and even learning from the very rival who had denied him immortality. Baku 2025 was already a turning point. McLaren had imploded, Verstappen dominated, and Hamilton's Ferrari again looked lost in the midfield. But what detonated across the paddock wasn't on track, it was in Hamilton's words after the race. In the media pen, calm but reflective, he delivered a sentence no one expected. Underscore, what impresses me about Max is not just his speed, but how he extracts performance when the car isn't perfect. That's something I've struggled with this year, in the SF25. Underscore, the moment was electric. The seven-time champion, a man who had spent his career as Formula One's reference point, had just admitted to learning from the rival who once denied him his 8th crown. For Hamilton, it wasn't empty praise. He described how he'd spent hours studying Verstappen's telemetry, examining his lines and corners, watching how he handles instability at the rear. Underscore, I've looked closely at how Max manages oversteer, how he plays with the car on entry. His ability to find grip where there is none is extraordinary, underscore Hamilton revealed. This was no throwaway compliment. It was a confession of study, of adaptation, of humility. The admission that he, even with 2 decades of experience, was still evolving thanks to his fiercest rival. In a sport built on egos and legacy, it was seismic. The paddock reacted with shock because Formula One legends rarely speak like this. Prost never admitted learning from Senna. Schumacher never admitted learning from Häkkinen. For Hamilton to say it about Verstappen was to elevate their rivalry into something historical. It reframed 2021's brutal war not as bitterness, but as foundation. From fire and controversy had grown mutual recognition. For fans, it was intoxicating. The greatest driver of his era wasn't clinging to the past. He was acknowledging the greatness of the present. And in doing so, Hamilton rewrote the rules of rivalry itself. The roots of Hamilton's confession stretch back to 2021, the season that scarred Formula One. That year, Hamilton and Verstappen clashed with a ferocity rarely seen before: Silverstone, Monza, Jeddah, and finally Abu Dhabi. It was a battle fought at over 200 miles per hour and in the steward's office, ending with the most controversial finale in modern history. Fans took sides, friendships split, and the rivalry felt personal, bitter, and eternal. For Hamilton, that year denied him an 8th title. For Verstappen, it crowned him as champion for the first time. The wounds seemed too deep ever to heal. And yet, in 2025, Hamilton reframed it entirely. Our battle in 2021 taught me Max isn't just fast, he's mentally bulletproof. The same season that once symbolized animosity had, over time, transformed into the foundation of respect. What Hamilton recognized was something only rivals at the very top can understand. To withstand the pressure of 2021, the crashes, the controversies, the global spotlight required a level of resilience beyond mere driving skill. Verstappen had shown that resilience, and Hamilton, with hindsight, could admit it. Few drivers face the pressure Max, and I have. That shared experience creates respect beyond results, he said. These were not hollow words. They were recognition from a man who knows what it takes to survive at the summit, and who saw in Verstappen a mirror of his own unyielding willpower. Their 2021 war had been brutal, but now Hamilton could see its deeper meaning. 2 gladiators proving they could bend without breaking. For fans, the shift was almost surreal. The venom of 2021, angry radio messages, defiant interviews, fiery press conferences, had given way to reflection. Hamilton was no longer replaying the injustice of Abu Dhabi. He was acknowledging the greatness of the man on the other side of that night. In doing so, he elevated their rivalry into something historical. Not just a fight for a title, but a shared story of endurance. From war had come respect. From scars had come recognition. And from one of the darkest seasons in Formula One had grown one of its most profound legacies. Hamilton's confession did more than shake the paddock, it sent shockwaves through Maranello. Ferrari had signed him not just for his speed, but for his aura, the belief that his presence alone could restore the Scuderia's prestige. Instead, his words in Baku sounded like an indictment. By praising Verstappen's ability to drag performance out of flawed machinery, Hamilton implicitly highlighted Ferrari's greatest weakness, their inability to give him a car he could trust. Insiders describe hurried meetings, with Fred Vasseur defending the project while engineers bristled at the implication that Hamilton admired rivals more than his own team. The tension was palpable. What should have been a unifying message of growth became a spotlight on Ferrari's dysfunction. Charles Leclerc, Ferrari's golden son, was caught in the crossfire. When asked about Hamilton's praise for Verstappen, his response was cautious. "We're focused on maximizing our car." Comments about other drivers are interesting. The hesitation spoke volumes. Leclerc, who has endured years of Ferrari chaos, understood the danger of such words. Hamilton's admiration for Verstappen wasn't just personal, it risked undermining Ferrari's fragile internal balance. Leclerc's supporters whispered that Hamilton's frustrations were now spilling into public view, dragging the Scuderia's weaknesses into the spotlight. For a team already reeling from technical collapse, the last thing they needed was a narrative of division. In Maranello, pride is everything. Ferrari thrives on mythology, on the illusion that the red suit elevates every driver who wears it. Hamilton's words punctured that illusion. By pointing to Verstappen as a driver who could tame chaos, he suggested Ferrari had given him chaos without the tools to master it. For fans, it was brutally honest. For Ferrari's hierarchy, it was borderline sacrilege. The reality is that Hamilton's respect for Verstappen revealed as much about Ferrari's failures as it did about Verstappen's brilliance. And that truth stung harder than any lost race.